Welcome back, everyone. We are still in Chapter 7. We're talking about target markets. And for me, as I've already alluded to in our videos, lectures about the chapter, this is a really challenging part of the marketing plan process because in our organizations, we tend to see reliance on markets we've gone after year after year after year, or the whole thought and attitude that we really go after everyone and we don't want to not serve anyone, so we cast this very broad, wide net. Well, what we're talking about very specifically here is those types of practices are not effective any longer. And with increased competition and all the challenges we face, we have to become really sophisticated with the markets we want to spend our resources toward attracting and making sure we produce a return for our investment every year in this annual marketing plan process. So I'd like to further look at how we're going to actually tactily pursue how are we going to pick from the sea of possibilities and really identify which ones we should target specifically. Again, we're looking at 4 to 8 target markets for any organization in our industry, but you specifically for our assignment and our semester are looking at one target market that you would recommend the agency pursue. So to help you and assist with the target market assessment and selection process, I want to break that into 3 pieces for you to help further support the chapter reading and really help you with this assignment as you look at all the possibilities in making sure that you're selecting one for the best position for the agency that you can. So we're going to put that into 3 distinct steps. And first we're going to identify the possibilities. The first step in the process is to really look at what are all of the possible target markets we could go after. And then the second step of the process is going to be to actually determine which one or ones we'll go after, and then really finalize that step of the process in step 3, and we're going to actually do a brand mapping exercise to make sure that not only this is the most effective target market to go after, but also to help us with the next step of the process, and that's determining what we need to do to really own that market and again produce a great result for this organization. So let's start with the first step, and that's identifying the possibilities. And again, for me, when I work with organizations in our industry, this is a really challenging process. So for me, it's a really fun part of the process because we really get to think about not only who an organization currently serves, but who they potentially could serve. And in absence of any of the assessments you've done so far, that would be an incredibly daunting task. It would almost feel like a dartboard and you're shutting your eyes and you're going to throw it at it. But we're going to minimize that by making sure we did all of our assessments ahead of time. Hence the reason we did a competitive assessment. Hence the reason you did a social media assessment, a quality assessment, all of the global industry market assessments. All of those tools feed into this moment right now. So as we do our target market assessment, we want to look at all the information you've gathered to date and all that you understand about not only the organization, but the broad picture landscape of the competition in that market, as well as the broad world, how that information will apply right here. And now we want to narrow down, again, that list of from hundreds of potential markets to target to the one you'll pick for your assignment, but also what 4 to 8 would that organization select for their annual plan. So in that step of the process, we want to identify the possibilities. And if you want to follow along doing a similar exercise thinking of your organization, I think that would be great. So break out a piece of paper, get something to write with, and I want you to draw 2 big circles on your page. Now these 2 circles represent demand in essence. So I'm going to pick an organization we're going to work with today, an health club in a market or a city. So I own a fitness health club, and it's a very competitive environment, as you know, in most areas that have health clubs or fitness centers. And I'm identifying in my organization what target markets we want to go after for this next year. So I draw these 2 circles, and I like always in our business to draw 2 circles to represent demand, because what I always consider is we have transient type demand in our business and we have group demand. And it's pretty important that we separate those kind of overall markets because they're distinctly different in their needs, but it also helps us take an important step of separating potential opportunities. But you're a hotel or resort, you're a bowling center, right? You're a food service operation, you're an event company. we tend to have maybe a different mix of business, a lot of transient and small group, but maybe a lot of group and small transient. But I have not yet found a business in our field that doesn't have both types of demand. So these circles represent demand, or the potential of who we might target. Now, keep in mind, we could always increase demand or bring in another market segment that would kind of fill that circle fuller. But that's a really challenging task to have if you're trying to take someone who's not at all interested in your products or services and have them become interested. And it certainly happens, but we're going to focus on kind of innately who's in that circle that has interest and what are we going to do with that. So first step, we do a couple things. Is we draw our circles, and these are going to represent demand. The second thing we do is take a look at Chapter 7 again, and Table 7.1 identifies 6 different variables we use to identify how we could potentially segment this market. Right? We know this is the overall market demand, but we know that there are idiosyncrasies in each of those circles that make their needs and wants very different from each other. So we're going to use that list of 6 variables to identify how can we split these down into like characteristics or like wants and needs, because they represent a unique group of people individually and or unique groups because of their needs and interests. It'll make us better providers of the service. It'll make us better able to communicate and reach them. So everything we do, we might think we mass market, we don't want to mass market. We want to identify targets of people that we want to go after to serve. Keep in mind, we serve everyone that comes to our organization. This isn't about who we serve and the quality we provide to individuals. This is about where we're spending our resources to go after other people to make a bigger impact happen. So we're going to use those 6 variables, and innately, the first variable of geography is identified in these circles already. So we have to use geography. We're not going after people around the world who might be interested in health and fitness. We're talking about people in a geographic distance, and that'll vary for every one of us in our organizations. So our geography variable here is present for each of us, and you need to determine your reach. How far out is that? Now, in my market that I'm considering my fitness center, right? My fitness center has a reach of about 15 miles. So I'm looking at 15 miles outside of my market is all I could go after for natural demand. And what influences that? One is people's willingness to travel or willingness to drive for that type of activity. But also, probably more so, is competition. If they have a variety of other choices closer to their vicinity, it's going to be really difficult to pull them away from other things, all things being relatively equal. So my geography in this case is 15 miles, and I want you to think about how far of a range. Is it a 60-mile radius? Is it a 4-hour radius? Is it the United States? I mean, could you really, Well, Walt Disney World could certainly pull from around the world, and they certainly identify different pockets, but they also narrow those pockets down, because going after someone in the Midwest is very different than going after someone or targeting someone in China, for example. So we want to define what that geographic boundary is. So ours is 15 miles, and so we've already used the geographic variable, and then we start to walk through the table 7.1 and walk through each one of those questions to say, should we use this variable to further break down this market? Because if I did use it, that does indicate they're uniquely different. So geography might be where people live, but it also might be where they work. It may be other things related to distance, etc. But for me, my fitness center, I'm going to look at 15 miles away where people work or live, because I'd pull them from either setting in this type of recreation industry. Again, every organization is different and unique, so you need to consider yours. The next variable we're going to consider is demographic variables. And they tend to be quite common, again, as we've already alluded to in this chapter, that people tend to use a lot of demographic variables, but they should be using them in the right way, because distinctly, if I separate people by that, their needs and wants are different. So if I look at a variety of demographic variables, some of the more common are gender, age, income, marital status, ethnicity, And I could go on and on and on, and our table in our textbook does as well. So as we look at each of these, what we want to determine is, are these uniquely different for a fitness center in terms of their needs and wants? So let's start with men and women. Men and women, are they distinctly different in terms of their needs and wants out of a fitness center? Are you saying yes or no? Are you bobbleheading up, or are you going this way? Well, for me, I'm going to look at this, and I'm going to always look back at, what did I learn in my assessments, and what did I learn about the research in my market assessment? Did I learn anything about the needs and wants of different fitness users when I did all of that assessment work previously? And I did. And I found that men and women do have different needs and wants out of a fitness center. So as such, I want to split this market into males and females, and certainly consider other self-identifying types of gender considerations in that. And as our markets change and as our demographics change, we want to really zone in on what's current and what's happening, and how can we better serve the entire population of people. So with that, we're looking at differences in general between men and women. And on the group market, that might not be as much, but on the transient market, we're going to work with first. So everything we do in the transient side for right now can be done on the group side as well. But so I can get a little bigger circle here. We're going to work with our transient circle 15 miles from where people work and live. And we're going to look through this demographic list as we move forward. And I'm saying that, yes, I'm going to use gender because men and women are different. So I'm taking this overall demand circle and I'm going to split it by gender. Well, how do I split it? Do I just split it randomly? Well, no, we want to go back to the research. So I looked up census information for a 15-mile radius approximately, and a safe scientific estimate would be based on what census data says. And census data says it's about a 50-50 split. So for this market, I know I'm safe to split this market by men and women approximately 50% of that space. So we used, in that case, census data to support that half of the market is men and half of the market is women. So with that, we want to go on to other demographic variables that might be a consideration. And age being a common second one, and we'd say again, does it make a difference? If we split people down by age, is there a difference in what they need and want out of a fitness center? And again, going back to the research, indeed, age does make a difference. Younger people have different needs than middle-aged people, and different needs than more senior people. So knowing that, I get to decide again, and this is what makes it more of a challenge for many people to walk through this process, is we want more confidence in our decisions about how we're breaking that market down. So all of those assessments, again, we've done before, help build our confidence and our scientific nature of what that breakdown is. So much research available to us, are we using it? So there has been a lot of research in this area as well, and if you went back to the literature, we'd find that there are distinct differences in different age people. And we're going to break that into 4 segments. Those under 12, those 13 to 17, those 18 to 29, those 30 to 49, actually I'll make it a 5th one too, 50 to 65, and we would really go 66 plus. So again, I'd like to suggest, the more scientific, again, we can do this, the easier it is and more confident I am in presenting that information on why I did that. But the data and research suggests that those age groups are uniquely different in terms of their needs out of a fitness center. So I would then take our chart again, and I would start to break that down further by those segments. So again, I want to be more scientific, so I'm going back to census data, and census data is going to tell me the age breakdowns. It already gave me gender, but it's also going to give me age breakdown of individuals in that same 15-mile radius. So with that breakdown, I learn what percent of each of these age groups approximately fall in our overall market. So, for sake of argument and debate here, I'm going to break this down overall. And we know that the under 12 market is a smaller percentage of the market. So, about 5% of that overall. The 13 to 17-year-old market, so we have under 12, 13 to 17 is approximately that same size. The 18 to 29 is slightly larger. The 30 to 49, and then the other piece of that pie, the 50 to 65 and the 66 plus. So I hope you're getting a sense of, I think of it like pie pieces, right? That we're taking this overall round market and we're breaking it down using variables that make sense, not any variable, only those that make sense, and we're breaking it down scientifically as we can to better think about what is this market made up of, and also how are their needs and wants very different across different variables. That only makes sense. And again, I'm not making it up. It's based on research and evidence. And if I feel like I'm making it up, I better go back and do some homework and see if I can feel more confident about the decision I'm making versus my bias or my gut feel. And you really get most concerned about bias. So with these variables, I've now broken down that market. And obviously, I would do the same thing if my estimate is about the same for the male market. We would have the same age group breakdown. So with that, these pies represent a specific size, and simultaneously we should be figuring and determining the size of that market as well. So as we look at this, how can we better understand what does this overall demand look like? Because it's a very difficult thing to manage, is understanding the actual size or numbers. But one of the challenges some agencies face is they pick a target market that's really tiny, and that didn't make a lot of scientific, sense, or logical sense for that matter too. So simultaneously, we want to get a handle on this overall demand. And if you think back to using census data, that could help us do that. So for example, we are looking at the transient market, people interested in health and fitness clubs, in a geographic range of about 15 miles. Well, you can bet in a well-established industry within our business like this, there's a lot of research and evidence out there talking about the number of people in a geographic area that belong to a health or fitness club, for example. So a study done by the American fitness industry, suggested that approximately 40% of most markets have people belonging to some type of fitness activity or interest. So knowing that and going back to census, we know in this market there are approximately 50,000 people in that 15-mile radius. So already, basing it on that study, we know it's 40% of the market potentially has fitness interest. So with that, we simply look at 40% of that, and we know we are at 20,000 people approximately that make up this transient demand. So our educated estimate, our scientific-based estimate, is a market overall demand of about 20,000 people, potentially. And again, varying degrees. They may have joined a health club at one time in their life. They may have a propensity to do it. It doesn't mean they're all doing it. It means there's potentially out there. So with that 20,000 already, we can look at the two variables we've used and further break down the size of that market. For example, if this men-women breakdown, we know approximately 10,000 are men then, and 10,000 are women. So again, a scientific breakdown using census data, our best estimate scientifically that's a relatively safe estimate of the size of the market. Further, we know out of this 10,000 people, we knew because of census breakdown approximately how many people fall into each of those age groups. So approximately, because of that percent, 20% of the market here, we're saying 2,000 people fall here, 2,000 people fall here, okay? 1,000, 1,000, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10. This is where the math really helps, right? We're saying approximately, and again, we would do it completely based on what the census data is saying. But we could safely say, to this point, we know that demand for fitness and interest of 18 to 29-year-old women is approximately 2,000 people in this market. So already, I haven't made a complete guess at anything. I've used scientific evidence from a study done by the fitness industry, from census data on 3 different occasions, to work through identifying the variable at the same time identifying pieces of pie, because it makes sense to break that market down. Their needs are different. So we could keep going. And income, is that a variable? Marital status, is that a variable? Ethnicity, is that a variable? Again, in certain markets, those indeed may be variables, because the needs are indeed very different of what someone may need and want. In my market, based on what I'm considering, I'm not going to use any other variables here. But it's not as easy to say every fitness center only uses those 2 demographic variables. It's not at all the case. If I was in a different part of the country that I had strong cultural, ethnic communities within my community, I would absolutely look at the needs and wants of people's cultural or ethnic backgrounds as it relates to health and fitness and wellness kinds of activities. So please don't consider these would be the only ones that we would ever use. We always want to consider the market. So with that, we want to move on to using other variables on our list. If you took a look at Chapter 7 again, in point 7.1, we know there are other variables we could use. Geographic, demographic, psychographic, syncographic, behavioristic, and certainly rec and leisure oriented, or what's the interest. So with this group, I'm going to use another variable that makes a lot of sense, and that's their interest and the benefits they seek out of the experience with us. So benefits sought, one of those variables. So we know with this market, we're starting to break it down. I'm using the 6 variables to make sure which ones make sense. I've already used geography. I've always used demographics. Now we're going to look at benefits sought. And in the fitness industry, I know from doing my homework, right? I know about my industry, that I know people participate in what we do, just like so many of the businesses that we're doing our marketing plans for in our industry. People seek the experience for different reasons. So if I threw it back out at you for a second, I'd say, why would you go to a health club? What are you interested in? Well, I know some of you are interested in getting healthier. Some of you might be interested in losing weight. Some reducing stress. Some socializing, having fun, a place, creative outlet even. Some about learning and growing, right? There's a whole bunch of different benefits people seek. So the more I understand about each one of these target markets, I am going to use this variable, because I know the benefits people seek are very different across lifespan or age groups, because my industry research has taught me that, and certainly what the information I know about my own organization and the people we serve has that as well. So I'm just going to blow up, just for the example today, one of the pieces of the pie. And so I'll just keep picking on here these 18 to 29-year-old females in this market, representing about 2,000 people. When I look at the needs or the benefits they seek out of this experience, several things are most prevalent. It's the health, fitness aspect, right? Losing weight, feeling toned, feeling strong kinds of idea. They also are into this for socializing. So the whole idea that they can meet people and hang out and have their interests and needs in terms of socialization met at a fitness health club as well, that is important to them. And aside from kind of that strength, I would say this is also important to them for stress relief. Now, knowing that already, the way I would approach these kind of 3 core different markets may be very different in terms of my marketing material and what I'm going to talk about to them, and more importantly, what I'm going to give them and serve them in this case. So knowing that this overall market, there's a % that are interested in really being healthy and strong, and there's a % that are in it just for socialization and having fun kind of idea. And then there's a % of them that are there to work out very seriously to deal with stress and things in their lives. So how can I apply this idea that I want to be really scientific about this if I can, versus this feeling a little bit like it's a crapshoot right now? This is kind of my bias, right? Well, let's hope it's not totally biased again. We go back to literature in the field. Can they tell us more about what is this 18 to 29-year-old female fitness user like? And if I can't find a lot in that, or research in that area, because the finer we get to these variables, the more difficult it is to find actual research that would relate to our issue. this is a great opportunity to learn from people we're currently serving. Are there any 18 to 29-year-olds at the club already that I could survey? And again, learn more about why are you here? What kinds of things are you interested in happening? And could I become more scientific in terms of my estimates here so I don't feel like it's totally biased? So the good news is, for my example, of course, I went out to the research in the field, and there was a study done, right, about younger women in terms of their health, fitness needs and interests. And it supported this. And it gave me an approximate idea that this tended to be the majority of them. At about 50% of that market overall was really interested in that. There is a percentage interested in socializing, and then a smaller group interested in stress relief. So for now, and again, in my perfect target market world, I'd have lots of scientific data to support why I was breaking a market down. It wouldn't be biased or just a crapshoot kind of feel. So the more scientific we are in this step, the better, because we're going to be more confident and we're going to make a more effective decision. So with that, we have a study, although it wasn't on my club with my consumers or my overall market, it was on this group of people, and so this will help me break that market down. So for example, again, I could take that piece of the pie and further break it down. Half of them here are interested in the health fitness aspects. And then we have the 30-20 of the remaining, right? This is social, and this is the stress group. Isn't that bad saying a stress group? They're not. They're just there primarily to reduce their stress. So as we look at these pieces of the pie, we can estimate, again, where we're at size-wise. If I'm looking at 50% of this overall 2,000 people is approximately in the health fitness interest area. So we know that's 1,000 of that, and of this 1,000 we're taking 1,000, we're doing, what are we doing? 3, 6, 7, yeah. I gotta do my math. See, this is bad. Marketers have to do math too. Don't forget that. We have 1,000 people left, and we're splitting them between social. We're going about 700, 300 just for fun. Okay. So now as I continue to do that, I would look at men. Do they have that interest? Are these the only 3 reasons men of that same age group participate in health and fitness? Well, we know that there's probably a difference, because the research would support it, that men are interested in physical nature, right? That's why free weight rooms exist in health clubs, mostly for males. Certainly an 18 to 29-year-old male. So we don't see those for women nearly as much, because the needs of the market are distinctly different. So if I was going after the male market in that same age group, this would be a different list. Their needs are different. So for now, what we're doing is using all of the variables, and we would continue to do that. For example, syncographic variable. Is this a time element for these folks? Like, do they have a specific time need to participate in rec and leisure? Well, certainly in the health fitness business, if this 18 to 29-year-old is going to school, well, then there's pockets of time during the day, which is really attractive, because I'd love to fill my 1 and 2 o'clock time frame. If they are in the professional working world and they have a 9 to 5 job, right, then I would be looking at different pockets of time. But because this age group has a lot of variance and a lot of different roles, I'm not going to use syncographic as a variable. In fact, I'm going to use it almost as an advantage that these folks are available at different times during the day, depending on their current life situation. So it's attractive to me for, again, another reason. So I'd go through all of those 6 variables. I'd identify which ones make sense for this target market, this industry, etc. And we continue to break it down to estimate as best we can how many people are we talking about in overall demand for this in our area. Once I make this kind of a chart, and I hope you're doing it too, and we're looking at group business the same way, now we're going to identify, okay, which piece of the pie are we going to continue through the next 2 steps of the process to really understand, is this really a target market that we should identify? So at this point of the process, after I've walked through all 6 variables, I start to look back and look and say which one of those pieces of pie, based on what I know my competition is doing, based on what I know we have and provide, which markets might make sense for me to walk through those next 2 steps to see if we should target them. And there hopefully we've already identified that there's more out there in the demand or in the area that we're not currently serving. Simultaneously, I should know how many people in this age group with these interests do I currently serve. I hope in your organization you know, at least by basic demographics, by age, by gender, etc., that we can break down our overall scope of people we serve into segments so I can better apply target marketing kinds of principles. So with that, I look at a couple pieces. I know what's going on in the market because I've done all those assessments again, and I see things like, oh, you know what? I don't see a lot of competitors dealing with this, 66 plus group of people. We know baby boomers are a growing number, more interested in health and fitness and wellness and living longer, etc. And I don't see a lot of my competitors doing much with that. This could be a possibility. I really like this health fitness 18 to 29 year market. Although I know a lot of my competitors go after that market as well. I think there's enough of them out there, and some of the services we provide make a lot of sense. So I'm going to take a further look at that market as well. And the other market is kind of this upcoming 13 to 17 market based on, as I float this chart out and I see it, I've identified a couple target markets that are worthy of going forward. So for our next clip, I'm going to take one of those and we're going to see what all that means. So come back, don't leave, get your circles ready, do some more practice with your own circles. How could you break your big overall market down? Geography, demographics, syncographics, psychographics, behaviors, benefits sought. You can do it. Don't be like so many organizations in our field that just are uncomfortable with this process. So they just feel we're going to target everybody and we're not going to be really specific. Again, I'm talking about serving all these people. What I'm talking about is who are we going to spend our resource on to make a difference. Do your circle, find your pieces of pie, and come back in a few minutes.